A word of warning, this podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes some strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime News, the podcast covering high-profile and under-the-radar cases from across the country every week. I'm your host, Anna Garcia. Our case this week is diabolical. It was a night of painting and decorating the baby's room. The mother was 5 months pregnant, and the father apparently didn't want the child. So police say that he put cocaine in the mother's lemonade, and she and her baby died. It took the jury 2 hours to convict the man. They decided that he was guilty of first-degree murder in the death of the baby. They said he intended to kill the baby. But when it came to the mother's death, the jury convicted him of second degree, believing he didn't necessarily intend to kill the mother. What do you think? We are recording this on Friday, July 10th of 2026. Our guest today is Beth Karas, a veteran legal analyst that you have seen on every crime show that you love, a new guest to the show. And Beth, you are not only an attorney, but you are also a former prosecutor.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Anne. I'm delighted to be here today. I was a prosecutor in Manhattan, in New York City. I did it for 8 years before getting into my journalism career, which is what I've spent the bulk of my adult years doing, my professional years doing. But I went to Court TV from the Manhattan DA's office, and there I stayed covering trials around the country, high profile and low profile, like you, from jury selection to verdict, for 19 years. And then when I left, it was going off the air. It's back now, but under new ownership. And I reinvented myself. So I'm doing podcasts, and I appear, as you said, on a lot of different networks doing analysis.
Well, it is such a pleasure to have you. You really are one of those trusted voices in crime reporting and analysis. And you also have a very distinctive voice. So I think even if you're not watching television or listening to a podcast, once your voice pops up, it's like, oh, it's Beth.
You know, I have had friends from law school say, well, I haven't talked to you in 10 years, but I was in the other room and I heard your voice from the living room and I knew it was you. So yes, apparently it's distinctive.
Well, it's wonderful and it's comforting, and your expertise is really welcome today on this case, because I find this case to be challenging, both morally and legally. And I can't wait to hear your take on it.
There are some very interesting issues. This is a case that's built on circumstantial evidence, but most murders are prosecuted with circumstantial evidence. When you think about it, direct evidence is a confession, an eyewitness to the actual crime, or you might even get lucky and have a video of the crime. So that's direct evidence. Everything else is circumstantial. But circumstantial evidence can be so powerful. Like, what are the chances that this and this and this and this happen? And we're going to hear a lot of circumstantial evidence in this discussion that points to Blaise Taylor wanting that, at least the baby dead, maybe not the mother, but wanting that baby dead. But it doesn't matter. If he killed her in the process, tough. You're going down for that too, which is what happened.
Yeah. So it took the jury, as I said, just 2 hours to find a former college football star guilty of killing his pregnant girlfriend and their unborn baby with a cocaine-laced lemonade in Nashville, Tennessee. The accused here, 30-year-old Blaise Taylor, a former Arkansas State football player, a pro scout for the Tennessee Titans, and he has been convicted of killing 25-year-old Jade Benning and her unborn baby girl, Ivy, who was 5 months old in utero. According to the prosecution, Blaise didn't want the baby, and Jade had told him, I'm having the baby no matter what, and I will be a single mother, and I will raise this child without you. And I know we're going to get into the details of all of this, but I am really fascinated by this concept of that the jury could clearly see he didn't want that baby. This is, their decision. But when it came to the mother, it's almost, and I don't mean to be crass here, but almost as if this was the collateral damage, secondary, if you will, death, because she was not the intended target. I find that fascinating.
Yes, and what helps the prosecution establish that point is that he had done this in the past. He had tried to get another former girlfriend to get mifepristone, or the abortion drug, for yet another woman he had impregnated. So he has a history of not wanting babies that are being carried by women he's impregnated. That helps show that he didn't want the baby. But it seems clear that the baby was a target. There are text exchanges between Jade, the mother, and she wasn't really a girlfriend by the time, like when she got pregnant. Right. They weren't even like together, but he was pushing her to have an abortion, and he came back into the picture, and she said, "I made the decision. I'm going to make this work on my own. I'm really excited." He never went with her to an OBGYN appointment. I mean, he did not want this baby. He was 27 when this happened, 30 by the time of trial. But he's not a kid, right? This is a guy who's very smart. He got 2 degrees, like his undergraduate and master's, like inside of 4 years in college while he was a football star. Very smart guy. And just did a very stupid thing. I just want to say, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but pregnancy is a very high risk for a woman in any sort of domestic violence controlling situation. Now, we're not saying that that's what was happening with Blaise Taylor, but he didn't want this baby. And that was a risk to her life, the fact that he did not want this baby. But I see this over and over again in stories I do and read about, research. Women are at risk if they're with someone and they want to get a divorce or they're pregnant. And just before we go further, I want to, because the verdict was first degree for the baby, second degree for mom, almost like she was collateral. I didn't really want to kill her, just that baby. It was the opposite result when Scott Peterson killed his pregnant wife. The jury found first degree for Lacey and second degree for her unborn child, who was a little more advanced in utero. That baby, Connor, was about 7.5 months, almost 8. And it's almost like the jury thought Connor was collateral damage. But Scott didn't want to be a father either, although he probably more wanted to get out of the marriage. In any event, high risk factor for this woman that she was pregnant, and then she's given cocaine dissolved in alcohol poured into her lemonade.
Right.
She was a chef. She was taking care of her health, her body, her food, everything she put in her mouth. This was not a woman who voluntarily ingested this, or I should say knowingly ingested this, even though the defense would want you to believe that she was using it or could have been using it recreationally. Not that amount.
Not that amount. In fact, the medical examiner said of all the cases that the office has looked at in autopsies that include cocaine, he's never seen a level so high in cocaine in the history of what they've been doing. And that's a lot of cocaine that was ingested. And that's pretty shocking because it wasn't to get a high.
I don't know how our bodies metabolize cocaine when you orally ingest it, but who takes cocaine orally, right? I mean, you smoke it in crack form, or you snort it. Maybe you inject it, maybe, combined with other drugs. But drinking it was weird, right? So, and I don't know how he thought he could get away with it. I've seen weird stories where women are poisoning their children or other loved ones, or men are using the antifreeze. It is poison, and it tasted like a Gatorade drink. So you could mix it with a sweet drink and you wouldn't know the difference. The companies that manufacture, I have heard, now put some sort of bitter agent in it so that it can't be used as a poison. But he puts alcohol in her lemonade. I suspect she wasn't even drinking alcohol, but she knew it tasted weird. And what really made this case was when she knew something was happening to her body, because it took some minutes for the cocaine to take effect. And then once it did, I mean, she was gone. I mean, she was technically alive, but not really. She
was vomiting. Yeah, all felt horrible.
But she dials her best friend who had just been at the apartment. Her best friend who knew that Blaise had been there, that they were having this date, and that Jade was telling him She did not want to have an abortion. She was going to have this baby, and they're painting the baby's room, they're doing things for the baby's room, as you mentioned. But she calls her friend, and she doesn't talk to her friend. She just is letting her friend hear her conversation with Blaise. What did you put in my drink? I knew it tasted weird. And that friend was able to testify to Jade's words. That was powerful. That was a 6-minute and 9-second phone call, according to the records. And it was not the friend who had just been there talking back and forth with Jade. It was Jade having a conversation with Blaise. And the only thing he says when she asks him, like, "You're scaring me, Blaise," he said, "You're scaring me." He says that. And then she said, "What do you have in your pocket? Let me see." And then he says, "I don't have anything." Nothing else did he respond to. And she's like, I can't feel my legs. And she starts losing it at the end, and then her voice drifts off, and she's apparently unconscious by the end of that phone call. So during those 6 minutes, she's like saying things that are very incriminating, and that went a long way to helping the prosecution prove its case.
Yeah, absolutely. She was really the star witness for the prosecution, because the baby ends up dying about 2 days after this incident at the house. And police then went to the house to collect some evidence. They collected something like, I believe, 4 bottles or glasses. And they did not find any drink laced with cocaine. So for me, her testimony, and I'm sure at the point of Jade being hospitalized and and everybody's life in danger, that at that time the police were already trying to gather some evidence. I think when we say there's circumstantial evidence here, it wasn't a complete search, right? Because I don't think anyone knew what exactly they had on their hands at the time.
So first of all, she was not dead when the first responders arrived. So it's not like it wasn't a homicide scene, and it becomes a homicide scene. But they did not know that right away.
Yeah.
And so the scene wasn't processed, to my knowledge. It was not processed like a crime scene initially. But more importantly, you have to have a search warrant to go in, or whoever has access to the premises or authority over the premises has to give consent. That probably wasn't an issue in the case. But more importantly, when Blaise is on the phone with 911, at one point, he's apparently not in the same room with her, and he may have even been outside. He had some minutes to get rid of that cup himself. Mm-hmm. That cup, it was in photographs that they took, and he took selfie photographs with her during this.
Right, they were taking selfies that night
after she ingested it. Right, so, but it was starting to take effect. Then she calls her friend, and everything unfolds from there. He may very well have gotten rid of the cup. That was my first thought. I do not blame the police. It's
no,
not their
just
fault.
Simply saying there wasn't evidence of it.
But she did have a pink drink because her friend saw it, and that cup was not there later. And her friend said that Blaise was not drinking anything, but Jade had that pink lemonade. It was lemonade. And he had the opportunity to get rid of it. So that is why that evidence is missing. But you're right. And no one saw him put something in her drink. And so the defense kind of said, well, how you know she didn't do it to herself?
Highly unlikely. In those levels, right? Like, why would
Correct.
you do that?
Correct.
Why would you do that? And as you said, the defense tried to portray Jade as a woman who did recreational drugs. But, even people, for example, who smoke, I think for the most part, when someone is pregnant, we know everything that you take in affects that baby. So there's no evidence that Jade was doing anything other than trying to, take care of her body and her baby. There's no other evidence. What you may have done recreationally before you were pregnant, because there was just no proof of that.
Correct. I mean, you can make arguments, maybe in some inferences in summation, but there was no fact for the jury to determine. There's no fact put before the jury that she had self-ingested drugs, anything that could be harmful to her baby from the time she knew she was pregnant.
Right. Right. There are several things that trouble me here. Obviously, I always say murder is not a problem-solving tool, right? And we see this all the time. There's always an incident. There will be an incident that triggers something. I always say whether a secret's going to be revealed. In this case, it would be a baby. How many women have we seen murdered because they were carrying a baby that the father didn't want, or maybe it was an extramarital affair? It could have been any number of things. We see pregnant women killed because of this.
All the time. I may be dating myself, but years ago, Court TV covered a trial down south, South Carolina, an NFL player named Ray Caruth had hired someone to shoot into the car that his pregnant girlfriend was driving in. She ended up dying. The baby lived, but is special needs. And that child is probably a young adult today. And he went to prison. That was an NFL player killing, the pregnant girlfriend. I mentioned Scott Peterson. These are just a couple cases that come to mind. It happens all the time. A case in Mississippi, University of Mississippi student. I was following it. He killed the young, undergrad who wanted to have the baby, didn't want to have an abortion. I don't even think they were boyfriend, girlfriend, but took her to this park area in outside of Oxford and shot her several times and sort of propped her up on the picnic table so that she wasn't found right away and she's dead. But she was pregnant. It's because she was pregnant. She didn't want to have she didn't want to have an abortion. And he's in prison today. Comes from a very well-heeled family who tried their best, but.
And then you look at someone like Blaise, right? He manages to get an undergraduate and a graduate degree while playing competitive college football. Clearly, he's a smart guy. Dude, wear a condom. I mean, he is repeating history here with the women he has sex with.
Yes.
And creating very dangerous situations.
Exactly. I look at somebody like him, I say, oh my God, there's a life thrown away. Not he killed two people, but he destroyed his own life too, right? I mean, he's going to be sentenced on September 9th. And am I jumping the gun by getting to that? But I just want to say that, there's 4 counts of murder, first degree, second degree, 1 for each victim, and then 2 felony murders. Which was kind of weird, to felony murder. Felony murder is different state to state, but basically felony murder means that in the course of a felony, you kill someone. Like there's no intent. There's no intent to kill. It's just in the course of committing a felony, you end up killing someone. You go to rob a store with your buddy and your buddy shoots the clerk, you could go down for felony murder because you were part of the robbery. But this, I didn't see the indictment, but I was like, what was the underlying felony? It was apparently the attempted murder of the other victim. So while attempting to murder the baby, he killed mom. While attempting to murder mom, he killed the baby. So
interesting.
See, he's facing the jury. They apparently when he's facing life without parole, which is what first degree murder, 1 count of first degree murder carries, the jury will decide sentence. It's capital. It could have been death, but they weren't seeking death or life without parole or parolable life. And the jury decides that one sentence for that 1 count. And they came back with parolable life. But he has to do like 51 years. Now, he's going to be sentenced on the other counts, which is the judge's decision. But the big thing that everyone's waiting to hear is not just like what the sentence will be, because he's probably never going to be free, is whether or not the sentences are going to be stacked or concurrent. And that means, because there's 2 victims, the sentences for each victim, once he's done mom's sentence, he's going to do baby's sentence, one after the other, consecutive.
And then he'll never get out.
Correct. And I suspect that's what will happen. There's 2 victims, but the sentences, as opposed to that go to each victim, 1 felony murder, 1 second degree murder, 1 felony murder, 1 first degree murder, those will merge by operational law because it's the same victim, same incident. Those will merge. So whatever those sentences are will merge. Question is, will the sentences be for each victim be consecutive or concurrent? So that's what you should listen for on September 9th.
Yeah, he's definitely not getting out anytime soon, and understandably so. He has taken 2 lives. Look, there's no justification. I mean, we can make arguments in other cases. It was something self-defense. But in this case, this was completely unnecessary. Completely unnecessary.
She wasn't asking him for anything.
I
She's like, I
know.
will make this work. However, he knows if at some point when Ivy, which is what she was naming her daughter, when Ivy was 10 years old, maybe Jade was going to hit a hard patch in her life financially, or wanted to send Ivy to a private school. She could hit him up for some money. He is the father. He does, by law, have an obligation to support this baby, and he knows he will always be attached to them. There'll always be a connection, and she could always take him to court. I don't care if she says, I don't want support. A lot of women would say, I don't want the headache of going after him. I'll figure it out. But he could technically be forced to give up some of his money.
You know what? That would have been a much better choice, obviously.
Yes.
But no, for some reason, this guy thought he could get away with it. So let's look at some of the details here, both of the two people involved and also the things that led up to that night and how we got to this point. So Blaise Taylor grew up in a football family. His father was a coach at Arkansas State, where Blaise would eventually attend. He made a name for himself as a standout defensive back and captain of the football team. He was athletic and academic, right? So in many ways, this young man had it all going for him. Okay?
Yes.
After college, Blaise stayed in the football field. He didn't play, but he was a scout for the Tennessee Titans. That's a big deal. You dream of pro football. Jade was also originally from Arkansas, and in high school she was in cheer and she competed in cheer. She followed her passion of cooking and became a chef and had a catering company in Nashville. Jade and Blaise met on Hinge sometime in early 2022. They apparently talked on and off for periods. They finally hooked up in August of that year. And by November, Jade was pregnant, told Blaise that not only was she pregnant, that it was his child and she was keeping it. So Blaise did not want this baby. We've made that absolutely clear. And at the time of her death, remember, Jade was 5 months pregnant. So there were no issues with the pregnancy. The baby's believed. Ivy was very healthy. What's important here as far as the timing of the murders, is that the possibility that Ivy would have been viable at 5 months during this incident. But of course, because of the level of poisoning and intoxication, there's no way really that either one of them could survive this because of the amount of cocaine. It was lethal. It was lethal. So on the evening of February 25th of 2023, because we got to go back a few years, the mother became unresponsive after consuming that beverage that we've been talking about. Okay, so that night, I don't know, would you call this a date? It's so interesting because they're painting things for the baby's room. Jade invited him over, was going to cook her famous chicken Alfredo. She's a great chef. So, I could see this as being a kind of night of, I don't know, trying to repair things and say it's going to be okay.
Yeah, but maybe a little bit of a date night, at home date night, because they really weren't that much into each other's lives anymore. But maybe she was hoping that he would see how she's faring. Like she's got the nursery and they're painting things with the baby. But I heard part of her friend's testimony when her friend talked about being at the apartment that night. And she said, like, what are you going to paint? And Jade was going to paint some things to put on the wall, the baby's room. And then she said that Blaise said, I'm going to paint a big black hole as dark as midnight. And the deeper you look into it, the more you'll get lost. something like that. That came right on the heels of Jade saying she was going to paint something really colorful for the baby. So the friend said it was just so dark, and she was like, "Oh, okay, maybe put a little color around the black hole, But
Right, some stars. It's a galaxy far off.
yeah, so very strange.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, what's interesting that the prosecution coming up with motive, they claim two motives. One, he didn't want the baby, and two, he was in another relationship and he wanted that relationship to work. So he needed to get, his baby mama and the baby out of the way. So according to the prosecution, Blaise was texting another woman at the time, and he was falling for her, and he texted the woman, quote, "I love you and I need you to love me back and be in love with me." First of all, who says that? I need you to love me and be in love with me? Are you crazy?
Yeah. That's
Yes.
that's an imbalance in a relationship, right? Should not have to say something like that. But maybe he knew what he was about to do, and things are going to get really precarious for him. I don't know. He wanted a break from Jade. I know the jury found that there was at least wasn't proof beyond a reasonable doubt that he wanted to kill Jade. Definitely the baby, but not Jade. But you got to wonder. That was such a huge amount, excuse me, of cocaine that you got to wonder. Maybe he really did want her out of the picture too. He wanted a clean break. He didn't want to be tied to her in any way, shape, or form. New love, new girlfriend, and new chapter in his life.
But what other possible outcome could there be? Of course it was going to affect her. How in the world? You can't extricate one from the other. They're all in one body.
Right. That's right.
So what else?
I have to wonder if he understood the amount of cocaine he was giving her, that it was such a massive amount that it was going to kill both, and she was going to be gone. Like, she never communicated again after the EMTs picked her up. I just wonder if he could do it again, turn the clock back, and he still was going to poison her if he would have put in less poison, less cocaine, because it was such a massive amount. As you mentioned, the medical examiner said she had never seen that amount ingested. It was obvious that it was taken orally, because the amount that was in the body. You don't get that amount in your body, through smoking or snorting.
This guy was just not thinking. This makes me think, and I don't want to take a tangent here on the Mackenzie Shirilla case, but it's the question of, this is the teen who drove a car at 100 miles an hour into a wall in Ohio, and her boyfriend and her boyfriend's friend were killed in that car, and she survived, and, she's been convicted of murder. And the question being, again, what did you think was going to happen if you go 100 miles an hour into a brick wall? Like, what possible other outcome could there be?
It's amazing she survived.
Yes, she had her seatbelt on, they did not. And one of the theories is that the two of them, because the car had gone from driving to neutral, were jumping over to stop the car. We don't know that. That is the theory. That is the theory as to why the two young men did not have their seatbelts on. But again, it goes to how can you poison a baby and kill it, but have it not affect the mother? What were you thinking?
Exactly. I don't know what to say to that. But prosecutors will argue motive, but they don't have to prove motive. Motive is not an element of the crimes charged, right? But it's always good if you can give the jury a reason why you believe this happened. And being able to call an ex-girlfriend to say, yes, he got yet a different girlfriend pregnant, asked me to get the abortion drug for her, like that helps to establish a motive. Plus, you had his own words that he didn't want in the text messages, that he wanted her to have an abortion. So it was very clear he didn't want this baby. And I think that's why it was very clear that the jury was able to say, okay, there's proof beyond a reasonable doubt that it was a premeditated murder of the baby. Less so, he's never tried to kill a girlfriend before, I guess. So, and he didn't testify. Right? He didn't testify, no.
No, he didn't testify, and he didn't say anything at sentencing either. You
He
know,
doesn't have to, like people want there to be more in a defense case. And it's like, that's all the defense has. So many people will say that. And I've covered trials for years. And it's like, they don't have to put anyone on. They don't have to put any witness on. The defense can raise reasonable doubt through cross-examination of the prosecution's witnesses. They can rest after the prosecution rests without calling a soul. Usually they do call someone, especially when you have a battle of the experts. And I know we're going to get to the medical examiner because that's an interesting issue in this case. If the medical examiner could not give an opinion of whether or not this was a homicide, right? She said it was undetermined.
undetermined.
Undetermined, which I also don't find unusual. I've talked to prosecutors and I've said, would you prosecute a murder if the ME couldn't decide if it was a suicide or an accident or undetermined? There's 5 categories. This is manner of death. This is what we classify it as, not the cause of death. The cause of death here was poisoning. Sometimes it's gunshot wounds. Sometimes the cause is blunt force trauma, stabbing. That's cause. That's a mechanism. The manner of death, there's 5 categories. Undetermined is the 5th. So it's suicide, homicide, natural, accident. And, right. Homicide, not all homicides are murders. Okay. Homicide just means death at the hands of another. The medical examiner wouldn't even go there than say that he's the one who put it in the cup because she's just not sure. She just wasn't sure. But I'm not going to say that, this is the ME. I'm not going to say she ingested this on her own. It was an accidental overdose. It certainly wasn't a suicide. I can't say it's a homicide because I don't know. I don't know. We don't have the cup. I don't know that he put it in there. We never found any alcohol, any cocaine on him. So she just says it's undetermined. So what? That's an opinion. It doesn't carry legal weight. It's an opinion. That's why we have battle of the experts all the time. A medical examiner will be called by the defense in many cases. I covered Phil Spector, the music producer's trial years ago in Los Angeles, and he was found guilty of sticking a loaded gun in this woman's mouth, and maybe accidentally pulling the trigger, but that doesn't matter because it was so reckless what he did that it was a type of second-degree murder. And he did it, but the defense was like, it was an accidental suicide. She killed herself. She wanted to go out in a blaze of glory. She didn't like where her career was, and so she did that to herself. She was drunk. Maybe she wouldn't have done it if she was sober. That was their defense. So we had a battle of the pathologists, the medical examiners at the trial. This happens all the time. So I know a lot of people made a big deal out of it that the medical examiner just couldn't tell. She couldn't go there. But it's just an opinion that doesn't carry legal weight. It's an opinion. The jury found it was a murder. Oh, by the way, when I say not all homicides are murders, homicide at the hands of another could be murder, could be manslaughter, could be criminally negligent homicide or some sort of reckless homicide, vehicular homicide, could be a justifiable homicide.
Right.
Sometimes people kill in self-defense. It's justified.
So I want to get back to the evening and the friend as we're going through what happened to get to the point of getting her to the hospital. So as you said, Jade's friend, Najaya Jackson, and one of Najaya's friends picked up some food from Jade's apartment that night, for the painting and the decorating of the baby room. So they stopped in for about a half hour from 7:30 to 8 p.m. We're getting into the timeline now. And as you've already said, Beth, they noticed the pink drink. He was painting something really dark and freaky, the black hole for the baby's room. I don't think so. So, they go through, they're still painting. She's taking pictures, he's taking pictures, and she's sending them. The last message that she sent of any of these pictures was at 9:24 p.m. Also, I want to remind everyone, how we're saying that the prosecution said, well, he was interested in another woman and he was trying to develop that relationship. One of the things that the prosecutors pointed to was that he told that other woman that everything will be fine going forward. And so prosecutors looked at that as, how's it going to be fine? I'm getting rid of the baby.
Yep. Absolutely. And who knows? I don't know if this new woman knew that there was this pregnancy, this baby coming in a few months, and that might have been a deal breaker for her. Who knows? So she didn't want him, maybe the new girlfriend didn't want him tied to another woman through this baby. So yeah, everything's gonna be found. Scott Peterson did the same thing with his girlfriend, Amber Fry.
Oh. I love it. For those of you listening, Beth just gave one of those hands, a hands of disgust and dismissal.
Yeah, but I harken back to Scott Peterson because it's back in the news, and people are trying to establish that he's innocent. He's not innocent, but he kills his pregnant wife on Christmas Eve during the day. But weeks before, December 9th, a couple weeks before, he told his mistress that this is going to be he just lost his wife and this is going to be the first Christmas without her. She doesn't know he's still married. She thought he was a widower. So he's saying in advance, this will be my first Christmas without her.
Oh my goodness. I know. People just don't think. People just don't think, honestly. Now, what I find interesting is, as you've already said, there was that call to the friend who was at the apartment, and she overheard very clearly Jade saying, "What did you put in my drink? I knew it tasted funny. You're trying to do something to the baby." So she was already, even as she's deteriorating, right? So we have this, which was, I'll never know. Will we know whether she called her, so she could hear and bear witness? Was it a butt dial? I just Good
point. That's a good point. I was thinking it was so she could bear witness. Maybe it was a lucky, perfectly timed butt dial. But I suspect she dialed it. Although he didn't know about the call, right? He didn't know.
I don't think so. He probably would have lost it.
Yeah. He might have hung up the phone if he knew.
Right. So, she could have done it surreptitiously. But I think, if she could have also screamed at her friend, it would not have changed the outcome by any means. It would not have, I don't believe it would have changed the outcome because we're talking about minutes here. Minutes. Right. We're not talking about hours and days. So at 9:38 p.m., Blaise calls 911 and he says Jade is having an allergic reaction. And they're pressing him for details and he doesn't know. The other thing that's interesting is he claimed not to know Jade's age. Like, they're asking very basic questions. Sadly, those of us who have had to call 911 for a loved one, generally everything because you got to get this person help immediately. He doesn't really know the address. Now, I can understand you may not know the exact address, but you'll be like, I'm in blah, 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 right?
Yes, and curiously, I listened to that 911 call. I don't think he told the dispatcher that she was pregnant.
You would lead with that.
I would think. Please get here quickly. She's 5 months pregnant. If mom's in distress, baby's in distress. How did he leave that out? She was showing. The photo. Some women at 5 months, they're still kind of not showing too much. She was definitely showing at 5 months, right? We've seen the pictures.
Yes,
you could tell. Absolutely. It's not you're not going to mistake her, and say, "Oh, that one got by me. I couldn't tell she was pregnant." No, she was pregnant. I don't understand why. So the EMT would know once they got there, but why didn't he mention that? I think that omission was curious.
A lot of things are curious about this case and that man. It's interesting when the dispatch is asking, well, does she have an EpiPen? He has no idea. So this is the interpretation, certainly by the prosecution, is that he feigns asking, Jade, do you have an EpiPen kind of thing, as if she might respond, which of course she can't respond at this point because by the time they get there, they can't even find a pulse. So that's interesting.
I think that she might have had a very slowed down metabolism at that point because I thought one of the nurses testified that when they did find a pulse, because she's on life support for days, so she is still alive. She was snoring. It sounded like she was snoring. That is apparently what can happen when you have a fentanyl overdose too, because you're so deep under, not cocaine, but fentanyl. But there was some fentanyl mixed in with the cocaine. So
For good measure, to make sure that the poisoning works. What did you think was going to happen? Nothing good was going to come of this. Nothing. I don't understand.
I suspect he fully wanted to kill the baby, not sure about Jade, and that he completely freaked out once she starts dying in front of him. He doesn't know what to do. He's like, okay, I really messed up this time. So he's where he belongs. I mean, he's locked up now awaiting sentencing. He should and probably will never be free. We're talking Tennessee. There's no joke in Tennessee. Nope. He'd be 81 years old if he's 30 now, 81 years old when he's eligible for parole, if he gets no more time stacked on top of it. And I suspect he will. So he will never be free unless he wins on appeal. I don't see that happening in Tennessee.
Blaise did tell dispatch that Jade had thrown up. And so the responder said to gently roll her on her side, wipe her mouth to keep her from choking. And when the paramedics got there, they did see her vomit was a pink tone, like with those, pink lemonades. So there was some consistency there. So Jade is taken to Vanderbilt University Medical Center. 2 days later, baby Ivy passes. Now, they still tried to save Jade's life, but the poisoning was too much. So she finally died about a week later, March 6th. And it was her 25th birthday is the day she passed.
She was taken off life support. I suspect the family said, okay, let's, do it on this milestone of a day.
That's hard. It's on the day you came into this world and on the day that you left, and such a short period of time on this earth. It's very sad. Very, very sad. Now, as I mentioned, the police then, after the baby dies, they collect some bottles and drinks. And what I find interesting here, Beth, is that the investigation continued, but Blaise was not arrested until about a year later.
Okay. So, and he had moved to Utah at that point. He was arrested in Utah. That also didn't surprise me. It takes a long time to do these investigations. They're keeping an eye on him, I'm sure. They knew where he was. They might have swooped in faster if it looked like he was going to leave the country. And it's a lot harder to extradite somebody from outside. Not impossible. We have treaties with a lot of countries, but some countries you cannot bring. You can't bring someone back. They had to really get all the evidence lined up. So talking to the friend with everything she overheard on the phone, because it wasn't recorded, but it was burned in her brain. Because when she testifies, she's unimpeachable on the stand. Those statements coming out of Jade's mouth minutes before those last words she ever spoke that we're aware of, right? She goes basically unconscious on that call. Those together with whatever lab tests they can run on, the fetal remains, on Jade's body, whatever, levels were in them, on if the vomit was tested, research into the background of Blaise, the former girlfriends, in his life. They track them down. These women, one of them, I think, came forward when she heard what happened. She's like, "Oh no, this is he wanted to create an abortion that's like a spontaneous abortion for another pregnant girlfriend. He did this." That was her opinion. So it just takes a while to just line everything out and track people down and get people into the grand jury or however you're preserving their testimony. And then, present the evidence, and get the indictment. And the indictment can serve as an arrest warrant if you get that first. If you make the arrest first, then you give a defendant usually the right to testify in the grand jury if they want to. I've had a handful of defendants testify in the grand jury, but most of the time they don't. And then you move forward. So it just takes a while. And, no detective is working solely on this case. And
no, I understand.
It takes a while.
But it was a year, and that was a decent amount of time for this investigation. And I get it; you have to be thorough for the prosecution. One of his former girlfriends, Apple Denny.
Yeah.
So she testified that she dated Blaise while they attended university together. And while they dated, she became pregnant. And because they were in college, Apple decided she did not want this baby at this time. So she did have an abortion, and she said that was to Blaise's relief.
Yes.
She said that he attended the 2 visits to the clinic with her, so to some degree was supportive. Now, this is what's interesting. She testified that Blaise contacted her, Apple, in a panic about another woman he got pregnant. Okay, so this would be now in his history number 2. And she testified that he searched in his phone for ways to induce a miscarriage or an abortion. And then the most damning of the testimony, Apple testified that Blaise asked her to obtain abortion pills and so he could surreptitiously put it into the woman's drink, and that she refused. She refused to do that, but Apple said what she did agree to do was pose as a pregnant woman to try and get an appointment at an abortion clinic. And Blaise was certain that he could get the woman to agree to the abortion by the time the appointment came up. So I found this interesting because, there's this argument all the time in cases about what evidence you could bring in from previous things that you are alleged to have done, that once you hear that, jurors are going to be like, well, he's tried this twice before or something.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're talking about this concept of prior bad acts. And some states will call them different things, but they're prior bad acts. It's 1101B evidence under California law, but this was Tennessee. I don't know what the code is in Tennessee. And that is, the judge will do a probative versus prejudicial weighing of the evidence. How probative is this to the factual issues the jury must decide versus how prejudicial is it going to be? I've had judges in much less serious cases where a person was an expert at, I don't know, shoplifting and had a record as long as I am tall of it. And the judge is like, yeah, I'm not going to let that prior history in. And I say, but judge, he's an expert at it. He's perfected how to do it. Why can't the jury learn that? So it's just too prejudicial. Got to decide this case based on just your facts and not his history. So judges will do this weighing, but goes right to the heart of the issues here of like what his intent was, right? Mm-hmm. That's was really critical to, and as long as it's not that long ago, it can't be something maybe 20 years ago, although we have seen a woman pushed down the stairs in Michael Peterson's case 20 years, 18 years earlier. That came into evidence, but because he was convicted of killing his wife by pushing her down the stairs, or he claims she fell down the stairs. I digress. But I think these acts were not that long before. And the judge said, yeah, no, they're relevant. They are probative to the facts in this case and what the jury has to determine. And I think that it was critical that the jury heard that history plus the statements out of Jade's mouth.
Right. I wonder whether they would have convicted on first degree had they not heard that history.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
That was very important to that prosecution.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Beth, as you said, his fate will be decided on September 9th. I don't know whether he will make a statement or apologize or anything. I say this all the time. Truly, truly feeling sorry for what you've done and expressing that and apologizing, it does not erase anything by any means. But it does... Judges can tell if you're truly, truly remorseful. And so the ones who just stand there and are like, yeah, whatever,
Now, I agree with you. However, if his lawyers feel he has a good shot at appeal, they may just say, keep your mouth shut, because we don't need you making any admissions about what you did if we're going to get another shot
Yeah.
at this. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I never was a defense attorney, but it's possible he's just taken his lawyer's advice. But I would agree with you when sometimes when you take a plea in lieu of a trial, like Brian Koberger in Idaho, he took a plea for killing those 4 students at the University of Idaho. He waived his appeal. Then you want to see some remorse because he agreed that he's not ever going to appeal. So now let's see some humanity here, but he didn't do that.
Nope, no humanity. No. Has been morally and legally challenging for me because of all of the complications here. It's, at the end of the day, you have a young mother and a baby, and for what? This didn't have to be. This didn't have to be. No. It is time for our comment section. These are the crime cases you all are talking about on social media. And here's our producer, Will Updike. Hey, Will.
Hey, Anna. How's it going?
Great.
Good to see you, Beth.
Nice to see you too, Will.
Now, normally no one really knows what's going to come up in this case. I kind of keep it a surprise, but Anna actually sent me this one. So, yeah.
Is it the penis one?
It is. Oh, my God. Yeah, I'm calling this one a ridiculous case of arson. This case comes out of Fort Wayne, Indiana, where a man is facing a felony charge after allegedly lobbing off his own genitals and using the removed flesh to ignite a fire in a garage. Yeah. Wild one. It's when Anna sent me this one, it was like a combination of words I thought I'd never hear in my life. I wish I hadn't, but here we are. So the details on this case are a little short, but I'll give you what we know so far.
Little short. Go on.
According to police, this incident unfolded on May 6th. When the Fort Wayne Fire Department investigated a fire in a detached garage from a residence. Now, at the same time that fire department workers are responding to this fire, police are responding to a report of a stabbing. And this is all going to come together here later. But when fire department responders arrived on the scene, the property owners claimed that a neighbor woke them up to warn them about this blaze in the garage. While they were talking to the fire department, the family that lived at the home noticed that a member of the family, Christopher Peden, was missing, though they didn't yet know that he was missing a member of his own. So as this fire investigation is unfolding, police are also attending to this purported stabbing victim. And this was allegedly perpetrated on our defendant here, 36-year-old Christopher Peden. Now, Christopher, he's badly injured. He's rushed to a hospital. And while en route, he's making these claims. He's saying that he was stabbed by someone in downtown Fort Wayne. And he alleged that he had also been threatened by someone the day before. Now, all sounds very bad, especially if you know about what this injury he's suffering is. So while he's being treated at the hospital, however, he eventually comes clean to officers, admitting that he was dishonest about this whole stabbing thing and saying that he wanted to be truthful. And that's when this alleged stabbing and fire crossed paths. Christopher eventually tells the officers that he went into the garage at around 2 a.m. And according to court documents, a little graphic here, he harmed himself by cutting off his own penis with a kitchen knife. And according to investigators, Christopher then admitted that he poured gasoline on the organ and set it on fire on the floor of the garage just inside the door.
Craziness.
After setting this blaze, what?
Craziness.
It's madness. It's madness. So he then walks away until police arrive. Now, court documents indicate that investigators collected evidence from this garage, including a kitchen knife, a red plastic gas container, and 4 lighters. So the story's lining up here. We haven't heard anything about any human flesh discovered in this investigation. So we'll see what happens with that. Now, Christopher has been charged with arson, which is a level 4 felony there in Indiana, and he's due in court for a hearing next week. But this case is absolutely insane. I just want to lead in with this comment from Cop 15 because I feel like we do get a lot of comments just in general in cases about sort of the insanity defense and how that whole thing goes. But Cop 15 said, okay, I almost never believe when they throw around this mental health, insanity defense, but this made me a believer. Go ahead and put him in a nice padded room, which I think is ultimately where this whole thing is heading. Again, I mean, a level 4 felony, Beth, do you have any idea? That can't be that much exposure year-wise, right?
Well, I have to look at Indiana law because in some states, the higher the degree,
it's the higher the felony.
The lower the charge. murder in the first degree is the highest, right? So level 4, but in some states, level 4 is not necessarily the degree. So I'd have to look at it. That's pretty bad. He intentionally started a fire that burned a structure. So that's, it's a felony, I'm sure. It's not a misdemeanor, but I'd have to look up and see what level 4 is. But I will tell you, you're on the right track about competency and insanity. I don't know that this guy will see a courtroom. However, the insanity defense is doesn't exist in every state, but I believe Indiana has it. And it puts a burden sometimes on the prosecution to prove sanity, that someone isn't insane, and sometimes it puts the burden on the defense to prove insanity or disprove sanity. So I haven't, this is on the fly, so I haven't had time to research this. But in the insanity defense goes to your state of mind at the time the crime happened. You would think that every man on this earth would think anybody who cuts off their own penis is not in the right state of mind, right? But competency to stand trial is whether you understand the proceedings, and that's your state of mind at the time of trial. They both, you just don't go to trial until you're competent to stand trial, right? You just stay incarcerated and medicated until they get you competent. I don't know did he know right from wrong? Basically, you have to know right from wrong. If he knew right from wrong when he did this, that's not insanity. Or he knew it was wrong, but he couldn't help himself. He couldn't conform his conduct to the law. I'd have to see exactly how Indiana defines it. It seems pretty insane, but it's a high bar to meet. Prove insanity. Oh, yeah. It's a high bar. So I don't know.
He's getting there. He's definitely close.
He's definitely ill. That's not right. It's not right to do that, right? Something's going on here. So he's got some sort of mental.
I can't even imagine the level of
health
pain.
Defense.
And then after you have, done this, and then you set it on fire and you're bleeding, and oh my God, what a mess.
'Cause you're talking about some major, sort of arteries and stuff there, I believe. I would think there'd be very significant bleeding. I actually don't know how you would remain conscious through this whole thing.
Exactly.
And I think with the insanity thing, obviously, we're just reading this from a court document. We weren't on the scene or anything. So it's kind of unclear to me if this idea of the stabbing and he was being threatened, if maybe that goes to his mental state and he was really super out of it, or if he was conscious enough to sort of be trying to cover this up. You know what I mean? Because I think that would make a huge difference in how they pursue this case.
Oof.
To prove insanity in some places, you have to be so psychotic. You have to have a break with reality. You have to believe that the gun in your hand, you think actually it's a banana. I thought it was a banana, but the gun, this fatal, lethal weapon. I don't know what he thought he was cutting off. I don't know what was going through his mind. He's clearly not all there. And I think a court is going to take that into account. He doesn't necessarily belong in a prison cell. However, if he is going to start fires, he is a danger to everyone in his community if he's going around starting fires, even if it is with one of his body parts.
Well, he's clearly a danger to himself.
Yes. That's a standard when you're locking somebody up civilly. In order to release them, you have to either find they're competent, they can now go to trial, or they are no longer a danger to themselves or a third person. And so they can be released. So, he's definitely a danger to himself. For sure.
Yeah. There's only so much he could cut off to keep starting these fires. So, it has to stop somewhere. We got a comment from a potential scientist here in the comments. Ken H said, "It sounds like he did the surgery for no reason. He had gasoline. The organ is mostly water, and though it contains carbon, would slow the combustion at first," which I like the analysis there. I thought if you're going to start a fire, there has to be some sort of better kindling.
Penis is not an accelerant, right? No.
Penis has accelerant.
That's a decelerant based on that comment.
Kim M said, "I wonder what penal code violation this will fall under."
Ooh.
Which is great.
Penal code.
Denise K said, "It takes balls to set a garage on fire." Pretty good. I'm going to end this one with a comment from Courteous One, who said, "Weenie roast," which pretty good. Gonna ruin that. Gonna ruin a little campfire hot dog situation for me for a while. But good comment nonetheless. But that'll do it for this portion of the comment section. Anna, did you have any comments you wanted to share from our wonderful listeners and viewers?
Yes. This is from our last case. We had a very special episode that we did on the podcast. My son Lorenzo joined us to have what I call a cross-generational conversation. And it was about the Mackenzie Shirilla case, that teenager who drove her friends into a wall and they died, and she's been convicted of murder. Because so much has been made about that case and her Netflix documentary and all the videos that have come out. And we all view things from different points of views based on our own generation. So we had a conversation with Lorenzo to try and explain to me and us, who is this woman and how seriously should we take her social media posts? Anyway, some of you had some great comments. Pip Skittles posted, I have to say Lorenzo's perspective regarding whether she would be as picked apart if she was a man as she was a woman was fascinating and one I hadn't thought about. So I just really thought that was interesting. And then Kelly Finello 6716 posts, she is as guilty as they come. She acted on her own emotion and the outcome was murder. She was mad for some reason, but I don't think she expected to live. We're trying to figure out, did she survived? And did she mean to kill herself as well? So it was an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it definitely was. Check that out if you haven't yet. That's such a wild case that I don't think we're going to hear the end of anytime soon. But that'll do it for this week's comment section. Want to thank everybody who sent those in. You can, of course, reach out to us on any YouTube video, or we're across all social media at My True Crime News. But until next week, don't do crime.
Beth, it has been such a pleasure having you on the podcast. This has been amazing. You're just so fascinating. You're like an encyclopedia of murder.
Well, it has been a lot of fun. I enjoy talking. So let's do it again.
I would love that. Please come back. I would really, really love that. That's just, it's been fabulous. Beth, where can people follow you or find you? Because I know you're on every crime show covering every case that there is, but do you have a presence on social media?
I do. And basically it's at Beth Karas, most places. It might be at Beth Karas with a 1-1 maybe on Instagram. And then I have a show that streams on HBO Max, and it's an investigation discovery show called Curious Case of, and the rest of that title depends on the episode you're watching. And there's 2 seasons now, Curious Case of, and that's a spinoff of Curious Case of Natalia Grace, which is everywhere. That 3 seasons is on, HBO Max, Discovery Plus, let me see, Hulu, Disney Plus, and then Curious Case is also, like I say, on ID, HBO Max, Hulu, YouTube, some of our subscriptions. But anyway, and we just wrapped season 3, but I don't know when it's going to air. So that's where people can watch me on my shows. And also I appear on 2020. I pop up periodically. I'm under contract with ABC. So I'll be seeing you.
Yeah, everywhere. I pretty much just put on a crime show and you'll see Beth, I think. You can find me at Anna G News, Anna with 1 N. Everything that we do is at My True Crime News, so we're pretty easy to find. Subscribe to our YouTube channel because that's where we have this really vibrant conversation. And I'm very curious about what you think when it comes to intent in the case that we discussed today. Also sign up for our newsletter at truecrimenews.com. So until next time, this is True Crime News, the podcast. I'm your host, Anna Garcia. Crime never stops, and neither do we.